We've already discussed the Keynesian macroeconomic approach to macroeconomic policy, which is really about aggregate demand stimulus in the case of recession and high bouts of unemployment. There's a different group of macroeconomists who see the world quite differently. Now, I'm going to call them monetarist or classical macroeconomists, who focus very much more on the, quote, long run, on policies that improve the economy's ability to produce over a sustained period of time. So that would be an emphasis on, say, capital formation, new infrastructure, technology, improved labor force skills, education, various things that really deal with the aggregate supply side of the economy and not the aggregate demand policies that is the emphasis of a Keynesian approach. So the monetarist or classical macroeconomists were really much more skeptical about aggregate demand stimulus as a good economic policy of the government. And no small part of that is that they focus more about the inflationary impact of aggregate demand stimulus. For example, whereas a Keynesian economist would say it's fine to run a budget deficit, a government budget deficit in the short run because you need to reduce unemployment, get the economy moving again. A neoclassical or monetarist economist would say that budget deficit is going to put upward pressure on prices in the long run, and also in another way to interpret a budget deficit is that if you try and stimulate the economy now by the government borrowing funds, consumers may look at that and say, well, you're say giving a tax cut today. Well, if the government's running a budget deficit, I'm going to have to pay higher taxes tomorrow, so I won't really change my behavior very much. So there's just this general skepticism about the impact of aggregate demand stimulus. Another example would be an increase in the money supply. Now, a Keynesian would say an increase in the money supply would lower nominal interest rates, encourage investment, purchases of new houses and new automobiles. And a neoclassical type would be very much worried about how increasing the money supply would have inflationary consequences. So a monetarist and classical macroeconomist would focus very much on real interest rates, having the nominal interest rate reflect inflationary expectations. So because the emphasis is on the long run and this worry about inflation, the set of policies that a classical macroeconomist would be very different than a Keynesian. And this really lies at the heart of many policy disputes about how to deal with the short run rise in unemployment, for example. Different approaches, different goals, different tools. Not surprising that these two groups would have a fundamentally different approach to dealing with macroeconomic problems.